back. Let's go ahead and get started with Chapter 7, The Real Trial. Al pressed his face and hands against the glass divider. He knew she couldn't be real, but the ache pounded hard in his chest. His breath fogged up the glass as he looked at her. She didn't say anything more, but hers was the voice he remembered. It was what his heart longed for most. Then his mom vanished. It was as if the past gave him back life only to snatch it from his soul. He yelled out, "Hey!" "Please solve this riddle, Agent Dangermond," said a voice. "You find a rotten carrot, a few small stones, and a pipe laying together in the middle of a field. What happened at that location?" Wait, what? He had missed the whole list. He closed his eyes to try and remember, but he couldn't do it. All he could think of was his mom. He sighed loudly as he raked his fingers through his hair, and he could feel the sweat coming off his palms. Things were moving way too fast. Al scratched the top of his head and slumped his shoulders. "I don't know. Can you please repeat the list?" After what seemed like an eternity, the voice repeated the riddle. "You find a rotten carrot, a few small stones, and a pipe laying together in the middle of a field. What happened at that location?" This time Alabaster didn't miss anything. "Someone made a snowman with the carrot as a nose, eyes with the stones, and a pipe in his mouth, and after, the snowman melted." Al heard a click, and a door to his right opened. "Proceed," the voice said. He furrowed his brow and looked back at the dark side behind the glass where his mother had appeared. He felt sick and mad at himself. Even with years of training, his lack of preparation and focus during the past few days was showing. He could hear his mom's voice in his head, the voice he had forgotten, saying his name over and over as he turned and walked through the open door. Al walked into a small room that had a wooden chair next to a table. On top were two items, a bottle of water and a map. He took a sip and stood next to the table investigating the map. "Sit," the voice commanded. Taking a seat, he continued to look at the map. It was a regional map of an obscure place in Europe, the country of Albania. He saw something scribbled on the map in pencil, but he couldn't make it out. As he examined the map, the lights went out in the room until it was pitch black like a cave. After a span, the lights came back on. Alabaster shook his head and rubbed his eyes. The entire room had been rearranged. Decorations of seaside scenes with labels like Florida, California, and Vancouver adorned all four walls, and on one part there was an odd scene of Durrës, a seaside town in Albania. The lights went out again. Expecting the change, he listened intently, but heard nothing beyond the noise he made in his chair. The lights beamed on again. Instead of decorations, there appeared 4 different movies, each on one of the 4 walls. The movies were black and white, and they showed various scenes. Al looked around and took in as much as possible. He sought references to Albania. There, on one wall, he saw the double eagle flag of Albania. The lights went out again. When the lights came back on, he only heard a voice ask, "How many references did you see, Agent Dangermond?" Al looked up at the ceiling. "How many references to what?" The voice repeated the same question. Al didn't like this game. He was supposed to guess how many references to Albania he had observed. "Look, I'll give you a number if you tell me how many of what," he said back. After a long pause, "How many references to each place did you see?" Al had done this before in class, but it had been so long since he practiced. He felt sick again and heard water slosh around in his stomach as he moved in his chair. "I can't let my emotions get the better of me." Closing his eyes, he thought through his time in the room, trying to process what he could remember. He determined there were 4 locations. "I saw Albania, Florida, Vancouver, and California." There were 4 references to Albania and 3 references to the others. "Incorrect, Agent Dangermond. There were 6 references to each of those locations," the voice said. 6? Come on. Al said to himself, pounding his fist on the table. A hidden door opened in the wall. Go now, the voice said. Al stood up and hit his hand on his thigh. He walked through the door into a new dark room, and the door shut behind him. As he looked, the room brightened. It was all white, with a small end table that had tools next to a large door. The door had what looked like an electronic lock. On the wall was a flat panel screen. Open the door as fast as you can, the voice commanded. You're being timed. A stopwatch began counting on the flat panel screen. Al took the flathead screwdriver and noticed his palm was sweaty. With the tool, he began prying off the lock panel. It popped off in seconds. Underneath, he found a standard electronic lock. Yes! He had studied the design and practiced on this type in training. He worked more quickly and grabbed the tool snips to cut the white and green wires to bypass the lock circuit. As he moved the snips in place, Al noticed something different. A short black wire. That's not right. He paused to take a closer look. The short wire was bypassing both the white and the green wires, making them useless. If he cut them, the lock would still function. He noticed the green wire tucked into a different port. If he cut the green, it would fry the lock mechanism with an electronic burst and fuse it. It would never open. Whoa, Al said under his breath. He looked up at the timer. 2 minutes had passed. He double-checked the locking mechanism and saw the red wire was the only one that would bypass the circuit and open the door. All his training taught him never to cut the red wire. Turnkey had hammered that into him. Turnkey is always better at electronics. His gut told him not to cut it because red always meant failure. He looked one more time for anything out of place, but saw nothing. He had to cut the red wire. All logical reason said he had to cut it. Taking the snips, he sliced the red wire. Al immediately heard the door click, and it opened. The timer stopped at 4 minutes and 24 seconds. Al jumped up in the air with a fist pump. Yes! He stepped toward the door. Am I done here? Yes, Agent Dangermond. Proceed to the next room. He walked down a short tunnel into an area that looked like an underground subway station. There was a one-person vehicle on the track that went into a tunnel. Get in, the voice commanded. Al stepped in and buckled himself. There were no controls, and the vehicle started moving forward quickly on the rails, zipping past lights in the tunnels and descending. He emerged from the tunnel into a place that looked like the real world, but was a manufactured landscape in a gigantic underground room. Before him was a skyscraper construction site with a tall building made of some completed floors and exposed girders. The metal girders formed the frame of a skyscraper. Al got out of the vehicle and heard a shout. Looking up, he saw the source. A construction worker was dangling from the girder. Help! Someone help! The worker shouted. Al dashed to the construction lift. He hit the control, and the makeshift elevator took him up to the most recently completed level, floor number 5, 50 feet off the ground. 3 more levels up, the man dangled on a girder that hung over the street, about 8 stories down. Al yelled up to the man, Hang on, I'm coming. Their eyes connected, and Al could see the terror on his face. There was no clear path up the girders, but Al used his rock climbing knowledge to form his plan. The man slipped down further on his broken harness and screamed again, Help! Please help me! Al bolted forward to the nearest girder and shimmied up fast. He walked across a girder toward the man, keeping his hands out to his side to balance himself. Hang on, I'm almost there. Alabaster's palms were sweaty and slick. He wished he had some climbing chalk to keep them dry. At the next horizontal beam, he made his way toward the man. Please, I can't hold on. My harness is broken and I'm going to fall, the man shouted. Al saw a coiled rope on the girder in front of him and grabbed it. He moved toward the safety harness latch that held the man in midair. Help, please, he said as the harness ripped further. Al strained to reach the man, but he was just out of reach. Al secured the coiled rope to a girder support and tied himself up. Hang on, I'm going to grab onto you. Al braced himself and then jumped at the man just below him. Upon impact, the man's harness ripped apart. The construction worker grabbed onto Al as he fell. In freefall, the rope came to its end quicker than Al expected. The hard jerk jolted both parties, and the man lost his grip. Al's palms were too sweaty to keep his grasp on the man, and he watched in horror as the worker plummeted toward death far below. In a blur, a large rectangular object emerged, rising up from the ground. The man hit the ground, and Al saw waves of air across fabric. A cushion. Al realized he was in the simulation, the agent trials, and this was part of his test. That made his side hurt even more from the jerk of the rope as he hung there dangling above the simulation. The man was real, but the danger had not been. "Prepare to fall, Agent Dangermond," said the familiar test voice. A laser cut through his rope, and he fell onto the cushion. The construction actor gave him a hand and let him know the trials were over. He pointed to an exit door, and Alabaster walked down a very long, lonely hallway to a small elevator that took him up to meet a CIA agent for his debrief. Al knew he had failed some parts of the test, but had he passed enough to become an assistant agent? All right, next time we will go with Chapter 8, Failed Hopes. See you then.